Okay, this is Dr. Mitchell again, and we're going to talk about some key points, some key aspects to doing a research presentation. And so, in order to do this, I'm actually going to go through and walk through a presentation that was done by a couple of our undergraduate students a few years ago. This was actually done at a research conference here at our university. And so, the bar is a little bit higher for this presentation, but I think the same ideas, the same, um, uh, there's definitely the same things we can learn from their presentation. So let's walk through this. So you'll notice first off, this is their title slide. This is actually done in PowerPoint. Title slide, as you can see, very big. Easy to tell what the title is. We have our authors. This study was actually supported by a research grant, so you have that information there as well. Let's go on to our next slide. Then our next slide, we're going to start to look at their introduction. This is their background information. So this is where they were looking at the effect of an altitude simulation mask on pulmonary function. So they start off giving us some information on this mask, what it's involved in, things like that. Just giving us, again, this would be part of their introduction, and as we'll see in a second, part of their literature review. Now, one thing you'll notice, easy to read. The picture they do have is big enough where you can see it. The fonts are very clear, very straightforward. Nothing messy. Everything's very well formatted. Fonts are easy to read. They're big enough to read. Really important. Now they go into telling us something about the literature. They're going to begin to tell us about some previous studies that have been done in this area, what was done, and then they're really building the case here for why they're going to do their study. So again, sharing a little bit about some other studies here. Then they're going to go into this current study's methods. Now, you'll probably notice there's a lot of bullet points here. These students, I will tell you, they didn't read from the slides. They just used these bullet points as talking points that they would elaborate on. So don't read off slides. And just going through the basic methods of this study. So they had 8 test subjects, 6 control subjects, gave their ages, a little bit about the protocol that was used, and then what kind of tests were done. And they're going to elaborate on this in the next few slides. Some pulmonary function testing, ultrasound assessment, and some VO2 and anaerobic threshold measures. So next slide, they're going to go a little more in depth into, okay, so how was VO2 measured? And here they give a picture of the VO2 devices we use, who's the manufacturer, what exact measurements were obtained from this. And again, they are not going to read this off the slide. They're going to use these bullet points as a guide as they're sharing their methodology, what equipment they used, how they used it, so on and so forth. Then you're going to talk about our pulmonary function testing, and again, how that was done, what equipment was used, what measures were obtained from their data. And again, just an explanation here. Again, not reading off the slides. Nice, very clear fonts, very well organized, easy to read. They then are going to tell us about ultrasound and measurement. And they're actually giving an example. In fact, you can see the image here is actually of the diaphragm muscle on an ultrasound image. And that's what they were measuring for this. And so, again, just they use this slide as a guide to describe some of the ultrasound measurements that they are going to do for this. They then, from here, are going to go on to the results section. Now, results section is just your data. It's not what you think about the data. It's not how you got your data. It's not what terms mean, because you've already done that in the methods. It's not what happened to subject 4. It's just data. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2, it's data for the entire group, not for every individual subject. So you'll notice in this data, they have mean and standard deviation for our mask group before and after the study, our control group before and after the study, because their hypothesis was that these groups would change over time. And then all the variables that they measured, pulmonary function measures, VO2, treadmill time, all the variable measures, the dependent variables they thought were important. Mean and standard deviation. Now, I will tell you, this table is there's a lot of information going on here. You can make an argument they could have put this data into two separate tables on separate slides. I agree with that. But you notice still, it's easy to read. These fonts are pretty big. You could see this from the back of a room. And so really clear, very organized. It's appealing to the eye. So really clear to read. Then what they're going to do on the next slide is begin to give us graphs of their data. Now again, these tables and graphs really clear, nicely titled. Bar graphs are very easy to see. The axes are well labeled. We know which is the mass group and which is the control group. We know on the other axis here we have change in thickness. This is of the diaphragm from relaxation to contraction, which is one of the measures they looked at. So very clear. This graph could tell you everything you need to know. Right? I often say graphs should tell the story. I should be able to look at this graph and know exactly what this means. I may not know the diaphragm, I may not understand everything, but I can see, okay, yeah, this is diaphragm muscle thickness, okay? We have a control group, pre, post. I can see those graphs are different. Mass group, pre, post. Again, the data is very clear. They even have the data values in the graph, which is kind of nice. I kind of like that. So again, graphs are really, really clear. Now, they're not going to have graphs for every data they did. They're just going to give graphs to data that they think is really important to their study. So we're going to look at some diaphragm data here. Our next one, this is FEV1 over FVC. And so in exercise physiology, we talk about what this means. And so they again looked at the mass group, the control group, pre versus post. They're going to look here. This is another measure, relative VO2 max in mLs per kg per minute. And again, graph is well labeled, good title. The axes are labeled, both the X and Y axis. There's values here, really, really easy to read. And again, the data is for the entire group. It doesn't have subject 1, subject 2, subject 3, subject 4, subject 5. Everyone in the pre-group wearing a mask. Everyone in the post-group wearing a mask. Everyone in the pre-group who's in the control group. Everyone post who's in the control group. So really, really key there. Okay, here's another graph. This is treadmill time. And again, just from the graphs, you can kind of tell, yeah, there's a difference in the mask group. There's a difference in the control group. Now, the next section is going to be their conclusion or discussion. And this part of the presentation obviously is going to have your conclusion, what you think you found. You also will typically see some discussion of how your data compares to research, other research that's been done. Is your data similar? If it is, great. Why do you think it's similar? If your study seems to show different data than other studies have, why? Was it your protocol? Was it your methods? Was it your equipment? Did you have the wrong kind of subjects? Are your subjects different? Why are they different? So this is where you're kind of beginning to talk about, what are ways this study could have been better? Are there things you could have done better? In this study, one of the things we knew was our sample size was small. The training sessions couldn't all be supervised, and so they talked about that in the presentation. They said, we didn't supervise all the training sessions. If we wanted to improve the study, we probably could have done that. Some of the workout training wasn't regimented. That's more specific to their study. So again, this is things that they could have been better, things that in future research studies could improve upon, and this study could improve upon. And then typically at the end, and they don't have it on this slide, you would have your bibliography where you have your references for studies that you cited. So this is a good example. It's not the best example, I will tell you, of a research presentation, slide presentation, but this is a good example to follow as far as format, style, choice of fonts, how slides are laid out, using phrases, using bullet points as a guide, but not reading off them. A lot of good examples here. So I hope this helped, and we will see you at the next slide.